Hello, I'm Brian Painter of the Oklahoman, and today I'm joined by Kari Watkins of the Oklahoma City National Memorial and Museum. And thank you very much for coming in and joining us today.
Thank you very much for having us.
You bet. Could you share with me some of the 20th anniversary events that are ahead this month?
Well, really, we're coming together to pause and to reflect on what we've lost that day and how far we've come. And so really it's wrapped around the actual weekend of the anniversary. The events that we're putting on within the Memorial Museum go to kind of an anniversary reunion of the families, survivors, rescuers, investigators, teams from across the country. They'll meet together just to have a time of food and fellowship Saturday afternoon. And then we will do a rehearsal that afternoon for those who are involved. And then Sunday morning we'll gather on the site, weather permitting, and observe 168 seconds of silence. Michael W. Smith, a renowned contemporary Christian singer, will be there and will kind of lead us in worship. And being a Sunday morning, our good neighbors at the churches all around us have been so cooperative again. We'll impact their business 2 Sundays in a row this year because of the anniversary on a Sunday and the following Sunday on the marathon. So grateful to the churches around us who have just time and time again reached out to help. And then we hope President Clinton will be here. We've invited President Obama, but we'll see who ends up being here. Whoever it is, it'll be an incredible time of reflection and remembrance, and I would say of celebration of life and moving forward. And I think what we have to realize is how far we've come together as a community, and that's something that as you look around other cities who have gone through similar tragedies, we set the bar high, and we're a great example. Oklahoma City is.
You know, and you talk about reflection and all in 20 years, and every year you gather for that remembrance ceremony. Every year those same emotions are right back there. Probably chills every year, right?
Well, I would say just because it's 20 years doesn't make it necessarily easier for people. I mean, people have figured out a way to move forward and move on with their lives, remarry, have babies, go to college, get a job. Whatever the people have done, they have figured out how to put one foot in front of the other and move forward. It doesn't take away the emotion of what happened. Just like when you go to the museum, it doesn't take away the sadness. But there's more to that story, and so you have to balance the emotions with the progress and how you weigh those two internally and move forward. And it's okay. It's a sad story. I mean, what happened here was tragic, but out of tragedy came enormous response and great help. And that's kind of where we're on this campaign for the Oklahoma Standard this year. And that's where it all ties back to, is how Oklahomans responded in the very worst of times.
Share with me some about that. You said there's more to the story, and Oklahoma Standard is definitely a huge part of that. You know,
we kicked off the campaign just this past weekend with the Oklahoma City Thunder. It's kind of the brainchild of the general manager of the Thunder, Sam Presti, who is also one of our trustees. He comes to Oklahoma City from being raised in the Northeast and living in the Northwest. And he just said, as we get further away from this event, we have to make sure this new generations understand why Oklahomans were revered and held to such a high standard because they gave so much. And I was talking to a rescue team leader from one of the rescue teams that came from around the country yesterday, and he sent me a headline of his report that he had submitted after they returned. And it talked about this Oklahoma Standard, something he'd never seen before. And I thought it was ironic. We just, in the weekend, we kicking off the campaign and trying to reach this new generation of Oklahomans who either didn't live here then or weren't born in 1995, asking them to commit to this standard in which we all lived then, and those of us who lived through it to recommit and say, we'll always make sure we take care of our neighbor as ourselves and put others before ourselves. And that's something Oklahomans did remarkably well 20 years ago, and we just want to step back up to that level.
Using that, going from the Oklahoma Standard right into the next question, how can a place that was the site of such a dark moment become such a beacon of hope to so many people?
Well, I think if it's only dark and sad, those who gave up their lives just by going to work, they weren't suited up for war that day, they went to work. And if we just make it all about sadness and all about the bombing, then really those lives, they haven't served their purpose. But if you can look at those 168 lives that were sacrificed that day because someone was mad at the federal government and took it out on the federal government, and people were either, working on behalf of the government or taking part in government in Social Security or Army or whatever way they were in that building. Those are remarkable stories of incredible humans. I mean, they were dads, moms, brothers, sisters, Sunday school teachers, baseball coaches. They had enormous lives. I mean, I loved last year looking up at a baseball field in Edmond, Oklahoma when my son was playing, and so it was the Michael Weaver field. I'll never forget it. I mean, I'm thinking 19 years later, Mike Weaver is still touching some boys' lives. And I mean, that was a moment. I remember texting his wife saying, I love that in Mike's honor, we're playing on his field tonight. And we played on every week for 16 weeks. I mean, I love that these lives can live on and teach in ways that my son will never know Mike Weaver, but he knows that he died in the bombing. He was a great baseball coach to young boys, and he served a purpose. Met recently a waitress of a lady who her mom had died in the bombing, and she waited on us at a restaurant and started telling us her story. And I thought, and she's going to college, but helping herself go through college and about to get married. Incredible story of progress and moving forward. And so for my kids sitting at that table to realize here was a young girl that lost their mom in the bombing 20 years ago, about to get married, her mom wasn't going to be there. I mean, those are lessons that today are as relevant as they were 20 years ago. And so you have to keep teaching that story. And it is not just about the darkness and the sadness. You can't tell it without it. But you have to also focus on the good that came out of the very bad. There's a line in the mission statement that talks about this memorial should teach the impact and the horror of the bombing with the tenderness of the response. And I think that's a very, very important lesson to keep mindful of as we come on the 20th anniversary.
It's a whole thing of pulling the names from the numbers, not leaving it at statistics, whether it was the number of victims or the number of responders or survivors or whatever. You pulled the names from the numbers and made it personal, and that's got to be very satisfying.
Well, I was walking through the museum today with a reporter, and I said, the one thing I think we've worked really hard at is letting the journalists tell the stories that the journalists told, or the survivors, or the rescue workers, or the investigators, or the attorneys. Those people put heart and soul into this. Whatever role they played, they gave it their all. And they are the better storytellers. I mean, it's not a place to be quiet and calm. It's a place to learn. And so when you walk in there and touch one of the 36 touch screens, or watch one of the 50 videos, I mean, or one of the 800 oral histories, I mean, that is what brings that story to life and keeps the story perpetuating itself. And that's very important. I mean, we have to remain relevant. We have to keep telling the story that happened 20 years ago on why it matters today. And if we don't do that, we're going to lose a generation of folks, and we can't afford to do that. What warms my heart is people willing to give them, or people willing to be at a point now 2 decades later where they can maybe never been willing to come in or could take a step forward or take, even if it's sad or hard, they're like, just let me see this portion. I mean, I took a reporter through the other day who had never been through. I mean, she said, I can't do it. And I said, let me take you to this one spot. And we went there, and she could go to another spot. Before we knew it, we were all the way through. But you have to take it in little small doses sometimes if you can't process that. And I totally respect that. But I think warms my heart is seeing, the kids of those who lost a parent move forward. I mean, to see Rebecca Denny getting married, or Morgan, her mom died in the credit union, to see her move on with her life and become engaged and plan a wedding. I mean, those are moments that you wish their moms or dads were here to share with them, or that they hadn't gone through what they went through, but they had figured out how to move on. You look at Joseph Weber, who was a survivor of the daycare and has not let it define his life, but he knows it's part of it. But there's a million stories like that. I mean, Don and Sally Farrell brought Susie's tambourine to us a couple weeks ago, and that was a prize jewel to them. But they know in the long run it's better at our place and being taken care of, and it'll always be part of Susie's collection. I mean, and that's a very personal artifact for Susie Farrell. And so how do we make sure that story's told, and so that that others can relate to it? And I think when you walk in the Gallery of Honor, you see other things, you find a story that you can relate to. And that's what I love, is this was a story full of incredible humans just going about their day, doing good work. Some perpetrators tried to redefine their lives, and people figured out how to pick themselves up and move on.
On a personal note, I took my son through in December for the first time that I've been through with a family member. I've been through several times, but I was able to show him what I wasn't able to tell him. And I think the museum does just an outstanding job of that, and just honors so many in doing that. And I really appreciate you coming in today.
Thanks, Brian.
Thank you.